if you're anything like my students, a lot of them are surprised to find that the brain is not just like in the skull, right? It's actually, there's a fluid barrier that is surrounding it. And it's not like the brain is floating, because that suggests kind of like, you think like a boat on like a stream or something, like you could jiggle it and jostle it around. Maybe the brain is more just suspended. There's fluid on the outside of the brain. There's fluid on the inside of the brain. And it's basically just keeping it stationary so that when I do this, I don't just get a concussion, and fall over dead. Instead, it is going to be suspended and in the same, essentially the same spot inside of the skull. Now, what's helping to create the boundary for that fluid are what are called the meninges in the meningeal system. It's also there to help protect the brain, provide avenues for blood vessels. There's a whole wide variety of things that are going on with the meningeal system. And our goal in today's video is to learn about it, to understand the meningeal system. And to do this, we're going to be using one of Kenhub's premium features that we call a study unit. This is the best way to learn your anatomy. This is a really in-depth lesson with very specific atlas images, which is what we are going to be looking at today. However, we are going to be linking down in the description below a 100% free article on the meninges of the brain that's going to have a lot of the images we're going to be looking at today, and then it's going to have a lot more than what we're also going to be discussing today, so be sure to check that out. But we're going to come over here, and we are going to click on this magnifying glass. I'm going to click up here so we can start towards the beginning, and we're just going to kind of get an understanding of what we're looking at, right? Because it's always important to orient yourself when you're looking at a new anatomical image. So what this is kind of like right here, right? It's really easy to see on me, right, with the lack of hair, but this is going to be just at the top of your skull. And what we can see is the right and left hemispheres of the brain, because this is like an anterior view. You are looking at the brain, although it's also a coronal view. So it's kind of like we went whoosh, sliced that way, and then you're looking at it like that. And this is the view we are seeing here. So we're actually starting a little bit deeper than the most superficial tissues, which is basically just going to be the integumentary system. But what you are seeing here is what we call a step view, or a step dissection, a step prosection, which is where we're basically showing you the different layers. It's like you could take a step down into the body. And our goal is to see what is going on here from superficial to deep, all the way to the brain. So that's what we're going to be doing, is going layer by layer. And we're going to be beginning with the skull. And so the skull is what you can see highlighted here in green. So the cranium. Now, what's interesting is you're looking at it, you can see that it's kind of porous. We call this cancellous bone. So cancellous bone, spongy bone, very, very similar, but we're going to call this cancellous bone. And inside of here is going to be a lot of blood, right? Bones are going to be filled with blood, the cranial bones. All bones really, but these cranial bones are also going to be there. And that's going to be important because blood is going to be there to supply the cells of the skull. These are called the osteocytes that are going to be sitting in there maintaining the bone, but you need to be able to get rid of that blood. And so that's where we can actually look at, we'll actually skip that part right here. I was just showing the periosteum, but we're now going to look at these blood vessels. These are called the diploic veins. So what they do is basically drain the blood from the cancellous bone, the cranial bones, and it's going to then take it to another blood vessel that we call an emissary vein. So an emissary vein is going to transport that deoxygenated, used up blood to what we're going to see here in a moment is called a dural venous sinus. So this is basically just a giant vein, but I just want to just stress this for a second. So you have these veins inside of there, they're going to drain the blood and put it back into an even larger vein. And these are residing inside of your skull. So then below that, that's where we get to really what we're trying to focus on in today's video. And that is going to be the meninges. So the meninges, again, these are going to be like the coverings, the connective tissue coverings for your brain that are also going to help anchor the brain to the skull itself. So this is everything you see here highlighted in green are going to be the meninges, but we are going to break it down layer by layer, piece by piece to kind of get a better understanding of it. So we're going to start with what is called the dura. Now its real name is the dura mater. So sometimes you'll hear people say mater. You'll see them say mater or mater. But dura is the real important part. And that's how I typically call it. I just say the dura. Dura mater means tough mother. Mater means mother. And to my understanding, this is because of an erroneous understanding that we used to have, and that, or belief, I should say, that, think about it like this, right? The egg and the sperm unite, and the first thing to really develop in that embryo is going to be these tissues, the meninges. So they were named the mother tissues, which is inaccurate. That's not true. That's not at all where how it works. But the name kind of stuck. And so when we then see the dura, meaning tough mother, this is a very tough tissue. So if you were to feel this with your fingers, it is really dense and fibrous. This is what we call dense irregular connective tissue. Really, really tough. And it is the toughest of all the meninges. And what it's going to be doing, as you can see, it's like it's anchoring itself to the skull, but then it's also going to be forming the boundaries of what we're going to see, that giant vein, right? That's going to be essential. And then what's happening, look at this, this is really cool. It's going to go down. It's going to go like this on this side. It's going to go down on this side. And then it's going to merge again and start to actually separate and create the different hemispheres of the cerebrum. So it's basically, when we say you have a left cerebral hemisphere and a right cerebral hemisphere, there is a physical meningeal divider called the falx cerebri that separates them. And it does the same thing to actually separate the cerebellum from the cerebrum. And it also separates the hemispheres of your cerebellum as well. Again, it's a different video for another day, but you can still see that happening here. So the dura is going to help create the hemispheres of the brain and the different sections of the brain. And it's also going to create a boundary for these dural venous sinuses. I mean, when we say dural venous sinus, I mean, that's going to make a lot of sense because it says dura in it, right? So then though, we can divide it into different layers, right? You have what's called a periosteal dura first. So if we come back here, so I want you to like keep your eye here. So you see there's two distinct layers here. You can see that separation, but I'm going to now highlight the more superficial one. This is the periosteal dura. All this is the portion of the dura that comes into direct contact with the skull, right? With the periosteum of the skull. So it's kind of like it forms the periosteum. It is the periosteum of the skull, but it's also the dura, right? You can see like it's one continuous thing is really what's happening here. Because what I skipped, if we actually go back, now it's worth going back here. This is what we call the periosteum. So the periosteum is going to be the outside of a bone, and it's made of dense, irregular connective tissue. And so what's happening is we have this dense irregular connective tissue on the outside of the skull, but we also have it on the inside of the skull. We just call this the periosteal dura. That is all we're going to call that. And you can see it also goes on top of that dural venous sinus, just like that. So that is the periosteal dura. But we also then have that bottom portion. This is what we call the meningeal dura. And so the meningeal dura is basically just the part that's deeper, right? It's the portion that is going to be coming into direct contact with the rest of the meninges. And we can see that this is the portion that kind of goes like this. It invaginates in, which is just a tunneling in, and then it's going to create this bilayer, right? So this is two folds of it meeting to create, again, what we call the falx cerebri in this picture. So the meningeal dura is just the lower, the deeper portion of the dura that doesn't come into direct contact with the skull itself. All right, so then we're going to get the subdural space. Now, we didn't highlight the epidural space, but these are what are called potential spaces. A potential space is a space that doesn't necessarily always exist. It can exist. It can exist due to injury. It can also exist if there's fluid that's inside of there that's supposed to be there, but it also may not be there and it can collapse on itself. So we're going to look at the subdural space, but I want to talk about the epidural space as well, because I used to teach anatomy to first responders. I did it for years, did it for close to a decade. And what was always enlightening to me about teaching and discussing with first responders is I love to talk about them. Like, what kind of calls do you see most often? Like, what is happening to people most often? And the feedback I was always getting were head injuries. And the thing that they were always concerned with were things called epidural and subdural hematomas. So this is where you're getting blood-filled swellings around the brain. Not in the brain itself, but around the brain. So let's actually break this down. So when we say subdural space, so again, here's the dura. all of this is the dura. If we can imagine that there would be a space just below it, and then the next tissue we will talk about in just a moment, if we can imagine this space potentially existing, now imagine you hit your head and rupture a blood vessel and blood starts to pour into that space. You now have a subdural hematoma. On the flip side, imagine that there is a potential space between the dura and the skull. This is called the epidural space. Now, again, this is going to be slightly different in the spinal cord because you've probably heard of someone getting an epidural. We'll leave that for a different video. This more so is a potential space, and imagine you hit your head, and again, blood is now flowing between the skull and the dura. This is going to have different symptomology. We're not going to be going into that right now, but it's fascinating to me to learn that that is one of, if not the most common calls that you're going to get for first responders. Or I mean, it was spoken to me like that. I don't know if the statistics on that are different or have changed, but that is a really interesting thing to consider. So these are potential spaces. So again, we can go back here and we can see the subdural space. Okay, so now we get to talk about this dural venous sinus. Now, this is a specific one that we call the superior sagittal sinus, and this is really massive. Like, this makes it seem like it's just this tiny... No, in reality, it goes like all the way right here. It's this giant vein that is going, it's like on the very top of your head, and it's just deep to the skull, and it's right between, in this complete center, and what it's doing is it's right above that falx cerebri. And again, what's happening is it's formed, like the borders of it, the boundaries of it are formed by the dura, which is why we call it dural. And then it's a vein, so it's a venous, that's where the venous comes, and then sinus. Sinus basically just means hollow space. And what's going to happen is we can see, remember, the diploic veins and the emissary veins are going to drop their blood into it. It's going to deposit it into it. But it's not just that. We're going to see, you can even see it right here, there's going to be something else that's also going to be placing fluid into there. So we'll get to that in just a moment. But these are the veins that you can really rupture. And this is only one of the dural venous sinuses. Again, this is specifically the superior sagittal sinus, but there's other dural venous sinuses in the brain or around the brain, right? Maybe I shouldn't say in the brain because this is the brain. We're more talking around the brain, but it's important to understand that this is going to drain blood from the brain, basically, partially from the brain, partially from, we'll see fluids different on the skull. And what it's going to do is it is going to deposit that back eventually towards the heart and kind of go to get more oxygen. So this is the superior sagittal sinus, which is a dural venous sinus. All right, so now what we're looking at here is the arachnoid. So this is the arachnoid mater. So that name probably stands out to you, arachnoid. It means spider-like. So this is the spider-like mother. And it's going to get that name because of something we're going to see in just a moment that looks a little bit like spider webs. But this is the arachnoid mater. So I'm just going to call this the arachnoid. So the arachnoid is made of loose connective tissue. And now loose connective tissue is a really important thing to have because that allows for movement, but it's still strong, it's still anchored, but it's also going to allow for things to travel in and around it. But what this is immediately deep to the dura. So it goes dura, then it goes arachnoid. Okay, so dura, then arachnoid. So if we now can think about it, to be more specific, the subdural space would be a potential space between that dura and that arachnoid. So that's where a subdural hematoma would be happening. But we can see that it's also kind of extending into these little things here. Now, we're going to give specific names to these in just a moment, but just see that they are made of arachnoid, which is going to make sense based on their name. So this is the arachnoid mater. Then we meet the subarachnoid space. So, which makes sense. Sub means below, and now we just met the arachnoid, and now this is a space. Now, what's interesting is this is where we see all these tiny little strings. Now, we're going to see, in fact, I'm going to skip ahead real quick because I want to explain them. Because we're zooming in on one of these things here. You can see all these little branches. These are called the arachnoid trabeculae. So a trabecula in anatomy means little beam. And so, like, you may have even heard of like trabecular bone. It's an alternative way of saying spongy bone. So these are the little cobweb looking things that give the arachnoid its name. These are also going to be made of loose connective tissue. So if we go back here now and look at the subarachnoid space, what's happening is the arachnoid mater is using these arachnoid trabeculae to attach itself to a deeper layer that we will see in just a moment. But what's happening is traveling inside of here are going to be blood vessels, but also is going to be cerebrospinal fluid. So when I told you that your brain is suspended inside of your skull, it's by cerebrospinal fluid. So what's happened is this is the most regulated fluid in the body, because I want you to imagine for a moment, if you do not have enough fluid in here, the subarachnoid space would collapse and the brain would start to fall on itself and start to pull on the different meningeal layers, right? It would start yanking on the dura, on the falx cerebri, on something called the tentorium. My point is, not enough fluid, the brain starts to sink. Now, that's not going to be good, obviously. Too much fluid, and it starts to actually expand the subarachnoid space, and that can be very, very bad and damaging itself. If you're bleeding inside of here, we call that a subarachnoid hemorrhage, and that is very, very bad, because this is not blood in here. I said there are blood vessels. Sure, there are blood vessels traveling through here, but there's not blood in here. There's cerebrospinal fluid, which is a filtrate of blood. It used to be blood, but it got filtered and became cerebrospinal fluid, which is a very different substance. Well, I shouldn't say very different, but it's different than blood, and it's different enough. And that is what is going to suspend the entire brain in that subarachnoid space. So again, the subarachnoid space is deep. It's just below the actual arachnoid mater, all right? So then we get, and I've been kind of highlighting this and mentioning it and alluding to this, these are called the arachnoid granulations or the arachnoid villi. So the cerebrospinal fluid, like I mentioned, used to be blood. Well, once it's kind of done, doing its job, it's going to go back into the bloodstream. And so it eventually, and we can't see it in this view, and it's a different video for a different day, but there's a whole flow. There's a whole pattern of flow for CSF, cerebrospinal fluid. And eventually it'll make its way to these arachnoid granulations, and it'll then just go back into becoming the blood, and then it's just, so it's cyclical. Right? Was blood, then becomes CSF, then goes back to being blood. And so the arachnoid granulations are where that is going to happen. And again, then we have the arachnoid trabeculae, which are also made of loose connective tissue. All right. So this is going to be what's called the subpial space. The subpial space is basically, so we're zooming in here. This is really tiny, but we are zooming in here. This is deep. This is, again, another potential space that there can be some fluid that can get inside of there, but this is going to be more of a potential space that is deep to what we really are calling the pia mater. So the pia mater is that bottom, that inferior deepest space that is connected by the arachnoid trabeculae to the arachnoid mater. So the pia means delicate or tender. So this is the delicate mother. This is made of loose connective tissue, and this loose connective tissue, among other things inside of there, is very, very delicate, right? There's a reason why we call this the tender, delicate mother. This is on the surface of the brain, essentially, because the only thing between the pia and the brain is that subpial space, right? Where you may have a little bit of fluid here and there, but this is, again, just a potential space. So you can essentially think of the pia being directly in contact with the brain itself. So to really to make sure we're understanding this, you have let's actually go back here. If we look at the subarachnoid space, this is really think of it almost like a room, okay? So then the ceiling above me in the room I'm at would be the arachnoid mater. The floor at my feet would be the pia mater. And then imagine the walls around me are more like beams. Those would be the arachnoid trabeculae. And then the space that I'm in would be the subarachnoid space. Do you understand the boundaries now that's basically being formed here? And inside of here would be the cerebrospinal fluid. So I would actually be swimming inside of the subarachnoid space in the cerebrospinal fluid. I would see blood vessels next to me. All of that is bordered by that arachnoid mater and the pia mater. Okay. And then we get to the cortex of the brain. So this is really the gray matter. So this is where you're seeing, all the synapses, right? There's going to be 6 different layers of neurons that are all going to be in here, which, by the way, we go into a lot of detail in our brand new physiology sections. We have a whole physiology study unit devoted to kind of breaking down just how these neurons work. But this is going to be the cortex of the brain. Cortex is Greek for bark. So like bark of a tree. This is the surface of the brain. And so you can now see, which I believe this is the last image. Yep, so we'll stay here. So this, you can now see how many layers are between the skin. So right here, we had like your epidermis and dermis and hypodermis, then the periosteum, then the skull. Like you can see how many layers are between here. So if you look at it from this view, this is everything that's happening. And then we can see the step dissection, the step layered view, all the way down to the brain. So I want you to think about this for a moment, and this is kind of where we'll finish this up. From like a concussion standpoint, from a traumatic brain injury standpoint, in order to slam the brain against the skull, you have to overcome this fluid barrier. And it's very difficult to do. Again, like I'm shaking my head and I'm not getting concussed. It's because there's a lot of movement that is allowed. But maybe I shouldn't say a lot. There is movement that's allowed, but I can headbang and definitely start to actually cause some potential problems. Right? You do not want to hit your head, because what's going to happen is all you need is it to slam against the skull, bounce around, ricochet around, and you're going to have a series of traumatic brain injuries, or at least just brain injuries and concussions as is. So, but these are the meninges, right? The meninges, going back here, just look at this particular view that includes all of it in one image. This, you can now see it. Right, the meninges are going to be the dura, the arachnoid, and the pia. And with those, you can actually create the arachnoid granulations, the dural venous sinuses, the subarachnoid space, right? There's going to be potential spaces between the epidural and subdural space and the subpial space. All of that is what is surrounding the brain and helping keeping it protected inside of your skull. So I really hope you enjoyed today's video. Again, this is a premium feature. This is one of our study units. I strongly encourage you to look at our premium features. They're amazing. This is how you want to learn anatomy. It is absolutely amazing. But at the same time, we are also going to provide a 100% free article to the meninges. We can go ahead and take a quick look at it. This thing is dense. It has images, just like Atlas images, just like we just talked about. It also has a lot of text. The videos inside of it are going to be premium features, but I strongly encourage you to check this out. Again, that is going to be in the link in the description below. But as always, thanks for hanging out with me. I truly appreciate it. Be sure to like this video, subscribe if you haven't, all that normal YouTube stuff. We appreciate you hanging out with us, and I will see you in the next video.